November 5th, 1943. Dawn creeps over the Philippine Sea, staining the horizon a dull copper red. The deck of the USS Essex is already alive. Boots hammering steel, engines coughing awake, the sharp bite of aviation fuel hanging in the humid air. Far below, the ocean rolls, calm and indifferent, as if it has no idea what is about to happen above it. Lieutenant Commander Edward Butch O'Hare is gone now, killed months earlier, but his shadow lingers over every Grumman fighter on the deck. The men walking toward their aircraft know the legend. They also know something else. Today they're flying a Hellcat that the Japanese haven't truly faced yet. You stand there with them, inches from the massive nose of an F-6F-5 Hellcat, its cowling still beaded with dew. At a glance, it looks familiar, bulky, brutish, almost agricultural compared to the elegant lines of a Japanese Zero. But under the skin, this aircraft is something new, something quietly lethal. The pilot, assigned to Bureau number 58873, Lieutenant James Jimmy Reardon, 26 years old, Iowa farm boy turned naval aviator, runs a gloved hand along the wing route as he climbs in. He doesn't know all the details. He's been told enough to trust it, enough to survive. At 0632 hours, the deck officer snaps his arm forward. The Hellcat lurches, then surges, the Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine roaring with a deep, chest-shaking violence. In less than 3 seconds, Reardon is airborne, wheels folding into the belly of the aircraft as the carrier falls away behind him. Above him, the sky is already busy. 30 miles away, climbing fast, a Japanese combat air patrol is forming. Veteran pilots from the Imperial Japanese Navy, men who have survived Guadalcanal, Rabaul, the long attritional grind that has eaten away at their numbers. Among them is Lieutenant Masao Saito, 19 confirmed kills, flying his trusted A6M50. Saito scans the sky with practiced calm. He has fought wildcats. He has tangled with early Hellcats. He knows their habits. He knows their weaknesses. What he doesn't know is that the Americans changed the rules. At 18,000 feet, Reardon levels off, throttle forward, eyes flicking between the sky and his instruments. The Hellcat feels different today, more stable at speed, less vibration through the stick. The armor plate behind his seat presses solidly against his back. 6 .50 caliber Brownings sit silent in the wings, each belt-fed and waiting. His radio crackles. Bandits 2 o'clock high, multiple contacts. The formation tightens. Reardon rolls left, pulling into a shallow climb. The sun is at his back, by design. Navy tacticians drilled this into them endlessly. Height is life, speed is survival. Then he sees them. Small shapes against the glare. Zeros, at least a dozen. For a split second, time stretches. This is the moment every pilot imagines. When training collides with instinct, when fear tries to claw its way up your spine. Reardon pushes the nose down. The Hellcat accelerates with brutal honesty. Airspeed jumps past 300 knots. The control surfaces stay firm. No shudder, no warning buffet. That's new. Below, Saito sees the Americans commit. He smiles thinly. They always dive first. Heavy fighters. Predictable. He banks hard, pulling his Zero into a climbing turn, preparing to drag the Hellcat into a slow-speed fight where the Japanese plane still reigns supreme. But the American doesn't follow. Reardon flashes past in a screaming dive, tracers ripping through empty sky where the Zero was. He doesn't turn. He doesn't chase. He climbs. Fast. Saito frowns. That Hellcat shouldn't be climbing like that. The sky explodes into chaos. Hellcats slash through the Japanese formation in high-speed passes, diving, firing, and zooming back up before the Zeros can react. Reardon lines up a Zero crossing left to right, squeezes the trigger for less than a second. The recoil thumps through the airframe. The Zero's wing disintegrates. No prolonged dogfight, no turning contest, just violence, precise and brief. Reardon pulls up hard. The Hellcat responds instantly. The reinforced tail doesn't flex. The new control balances don't lock up. The aircraft holds together at speeds that would have torn earlier fighters apart. Below him, another Hellcat takes hits, 20mm cannon shells tearing into its fuselage. The American pilot doesn't spiral down. He keeps flying. The armor holds. The self-sealing tanks do their job. The Japanese pilots notice. Confusion ripples through their formation. These Hellcats don't behave the way they're supposed to. They dive faster. They climb harder. They don't bleed speed in the vertical. Saito tries to adjust. He forces a Zero into a tight turn, pulling G's, waiting for the Hellcat to commit. It never does. Instead, the American roars past again, this time from above, and Saito feels the world erupt around him as 50 caliber rounds hammer through his engine cowling. The Zero shudders. Smoke pours back into the cockpit. For the first time in years of combat, Saito feels something cold settle in his chest. Not fear. Realization. The enemy has changed, and no one told him. Saito shoves the throttle forward, the Zero coughing as the damaged engine protests. The nose dips. Altitude bleeds away. Below him, the ocean grows sharper, closer, unforgiving. He scans wildly for a way out, for the familiar patterns of American mistakes. overconfidence, slow recovery, a pilot who commits too hard. He finds none. Above him, Reardon is already rolling inverted. This is the part Japanese pilots don't see, not from the outside, not in silhouette against the sun. Inside the Hellcat, cables, linkages, and control balances have been quietly reworked. Grumman engineers learned the hard way in 1943 that speed was killing pilots as often as enemy guns, control stiffening at high velocity, compressibility effects in steep dives, aircraft that could go fast but couldn't be used fast. So they fixed it. Reardon pulls into a high-speed dive again, steeper this time. The airframe hums, a deep metallic vibration that travels through the seat and into his bones. The airspeed needle swings higher than he's ever dared before. The controls stay alive. That's the secret. The Hellcat doesn't fight him. It doesn't lock up. It doesn't threaten to tear itself apart. He lines up the smoking zero below. Saito knows he's finished before the first round's hit. The Hellcat comes down like gravity itself, guns flashing. The sound, not a staccato chatter, but a continuous ripping roar. The Zero jerks violently. The engine seizes. The cockpit fills with smoke. Saito releases the canopy and throws himself clear, the slipstream ripping him away as the aircraft tumbles toward the sea. Above, Reardon pulls out cleanly, climbing hard, already scanning for the next target. The entire engagement has taken less than 6 minutes. As the surviving Japanese pilots disengage, scattering low and fast, the Americans don't pursue recklessly. They reform, they climb, they reset. That discipline, newly enforced, brutally drilled, is part of the same quiet transformation. The Hellcat was never meant to dance. It was meant to hunt. Hours later, back aboard the Essex, the deck is slick with oil and seawater. Aircraft roll in one by one, some scarred, some pristine. Reardon's Hellcat thumps down hard, tailhook catching the wire with a jolt that rattles his teeth. When he shuts down the engine, the sudden silence feels unreal. Mechanics swarm the aircraft. They count holes. They shake their heads. "Hell of a thing," one of them mutters, tapping a dent near the cockpit where a shell failed to penetrate. "That would have killed you last year." Reardon doesn't answer. He just nods, pulling off his helmet, hands still trembling slightly. In the ready room, pilots crowd around a chalkboard as intelligence officers sketch diagrams, dives, climbs, kill angles. Names are written and erased. Japanese losses tallied. American losses minimal. Someone asks the question everyone's thinking. What the hell were they flying? The answer is simple. The same Hellcat, just not the same version. Across the Pacific, Japanese after-action reports begin to circulate. Confusion bleeds through every line. Pilots describe American fighters that dive too fast to follow, fighters that survive direct hits, fighters that refuse to turn and yet win anyway. Some commanders dismiss it as pilot error, others blame fuel quality, training, morale, but the veterans know better. Something fundamental has shifted. The truth is, the Hellcat didn't become deadly overnight. It was refined, incrementally, quietly, ruthlessly. Stronger tail surfaces to survive high-speed dives, improved armor placement that protected the pilot without sacrificing performance, engine tuning that wrung every usable ounce of power from the R2800 without compromising reliability. Most critically, the aircraft was designed around American pilots, men with less pre-war flight time than their Japanese counterparts, but backed by an industrial system that learned faster than it forgot. By late 1943, this difference becomes impossible to ignore. Japanese aces still win individual fights. They still outturn, outclimb, outfinesse careless opponents. But the careless ones are disappearing. In their place are pilots like Reardon, methodical, disciplined, flying an aircraft that forgives mistakes and punishes hesitation. Weeks later, in another patch of Pacific sky, another Japanese ace watches a Hellcat dive away from him, straight down, faster than seems possible. He doesn't follow. He's learned. That decision saves his life. But it doesn't change the outcome of the war, because the Hellcat doesn't need to surprise you twice. December 4th, 1943, north of Kwajalein Atoll, 22,000 feet. The air is thinner up here, colder, sharper. Your breath fogs the inside of the oxygen mask with every exhale. Below, the Pacific stretches in endless blue plates, broken only by white coral rings and the faint smudges of smoke from ships already burning. Lieutenant Charles Brewer, VF-15, eases his Hellcat into formation, eyes locked on the horizon. This mission is different. No escort, no defensive sweep. They're here to provoke. American radar has learned the patterns. Japanese interceptors will rise fast from Roy Namur and Kwajalein airfields, climbing hard to meet the threat. That climb, once the Zero's greatest strength, is now a trap. Brewer tightens his grip on the stick. He knows what his Hellcat can do now. The contact report comes at 0821. Bandits climbing, 12 plus, Angels 15. Below, tiny silver flecks begin clawing upward, engines screaming as Japanese pilots push their machines to the edge of performance. Among them is Petty Officer First Class Kenji Nakamura, a survivor of more fights than he can remember. His Zero feels light today, eager, responsive, but he notices something strange. The Americans aren't coming down. They're climbing too. At 24,000 feet, Brewer levels off and pushes the throttle through the gate. The Hellcat surges forward, engine roaring with controlled fury. The airframe stays rock solid, no flutter, no loss of authority. This altitude, this speed. Earlier Hellcats would have been cautious here. Not anymore. The Americans roll as one, nose is dropping slightly, converting altitude into velocity. They don't dive at the Japanese. They dive past them. Brewer flashes by a climbing Zero so fast he barely registers the red Hinamaru on its wings. He squeezes the trigger for half a second. The Zero erupts into fragments. Nakamura watches it happen, stunned. The Hellcat didn't turn. It didn't slow. It didn't give him time to react. It simply passed through the fight like a scythe. This is the new doctrine, born directly from the Hellcat's hidden improvements. American pilots call it boom and zoom, but that phrase doesn't capture the violence of it. This isn't a tactic of opportunity. It's a system. Dive, fire, climb, reset. Over and over. The Hellcat's strengthened structure allows pilots to pull out of dives at speeds that would black out lesser aircraft, or snap their tails clean off. The redesigned control geometry keeps the stick responsive even as the air thickens and the forces spike. For Japanese pilots, the fight becomes maddening. They see the Americans coming. They just can't reach them. Nakamura tries anyway. He pitches a Zero up, chasing a Hellcat climbing away, propeller biting thin air. The American aircraft doesn't wallow, it doesn't stall. It climbs like a loaded hammer, heavy but unstoppable. The distance widens. Nakamura feels his engine strain, oil temperature climbs. He has to break off or risk cooking it dry. Below him, another Hellcat dives. Too fast. The rounds hit before he hears the guns. By 0840, the sky is littered with parachutes and smoke trails. The Americans regroup at altitude, counting heads. They've lost one aircraft, engine failure on climb out. No pilot losses. Japanese losses are catastrophic. Back aboard the carriers, intelligence officers take notes, comparing reports from squadron to squadron. The same phrases appear again and again. Enemy could not follow in dive. High-speed control maintained. Repeated slashing attacks. What they don't write down, what doesn't make it into the official summaries, is the shift in confidence. American pilots now trust their aircraft completely, and Japanese pilots no longer trust theirs. By early 1944, the pattern is undeniable. Wherever the upgraded Hellcats appear, Japanese air resistance collapses faster. Not because the Zero is suddenly useless, but because the terms of the fight have changed beyond recognition. Speed is no longer just an advantage. It's a weapon, and the Hellcat wields it without mercy. January 19th, 1944, Truk Lagoon, 20,000 feet. The sky over Japan's so-called Gibraltar of the Pacific is alive with contrails. Below, the anchorage glitters with warships, cruisers, destroyers, tankers, crowded so tightly that from altitude they look invulnerable. For years, Truk has been untouchable. Today, it is exposed. Lieutenant Robert McLean, VF-2, rolls his Hellcat onto its back and peers down through the canopy glass. Anti-aircraft bursts bloom below like black flowers. Somewhere beneath that flak curtain are the best remaining pilots the Imperial Japanese Navy can muster. Among them is Commander Hiroyoshi Nishizawa, already a legend, already an ace beyond counting. He has fought Americans since 1942. He knows their machines, he knows their habits. But even Nishizawa feels it now, the hesitation. The Japanese scramble is desperate. Zeros claw upward from Truk's airfields, engines screaming, fuel burned without restraint. Nishizawa leads his section higher than doctrine allows, gambling on altitude. It almost works. He spots the Americans first, dark shapes above the sun, cruising instead of climbing, waiting. The Hellcats tip over together. McLean pushes into the dive, the aircraft accelerating like it's been shoved off a cliff. The flak fades. The world narrows to speed, angle, and timing. He picks a Zero braking left, lines up the lead, fires. The Japanese fighter disintegrates. He pulls out at over 400 knots. The Hellcat's structure absorbing forces that would have crushed earlier designs. His vision tunnels, then clears. He's already climbing again. Behind him, Nishizawa tries to respond. He rolls hard, tightening the turn, trying to pull the American into a classic engagement. For a split second, the Hellcat almost commits. Then it vanishes upward. Nishizawa grits his teeth. This isn't a duel. It's an execution. The battle fractures into isolated moments of terror. Zeros try to scatter, to drag Hellcats low where maneuverability still counts. The Americans refuse. They climb, reset, and strike again. One by one, the Japanese aces disappear. Men with dozens of kills, years of experience, survivors of Midway, Santa Cruz, Guadalcanal. They fall not because they forgot how to fight, but because the fight no longer resembles the one they mastered. By midday, Truk's air defenses are shattered. The anchorage burns. Japanese pilots limp home on damaged aircraft, or not at all. Nishizawa escapes, barely, fuel gauge, flirting with empty, his Zero riddled with holes. He lands knowing something few commanders will admit out loud. Air superiority has been lost. In American ready rooms that evening, the mood is subdued. victorious, but sober. The Hellcat has done exactly what it was built to do: kill the best the enemy has. The upgraded machine has turned experience into a liability. Japanese aces fly aggressively, trusting instincts formed in another era. Hellcat pilots exploit that predictability mercilessly. Strength, speed, control. No theatrics. No honor. Just results. The Imperial Japanese Navy will never fully recover from this loss. Training programs can't replace skill at this scale. Fuel shortages limit flight hours. New pilots arrive with barely a fraction of the experience their predecessors had. And overhead, the Hellcat waits. February 16th, 1944. Operation Hailstone. The sky over Truk is a graveyard. Smoke columns coil upward from shattered ships. Oil burns on the water in vast, rainbow-slicked sheets. Wreckage floats everywhere. Wings, fuselages, life rafts already empty. At 21,000 feet, Lieutenant Thomas Gallagher steadies his Hellcat, watching the last organized Japanese resistance dissolve below him. There are still enemy aircraft in the air, but they no longer attack in coordinated waves. They flee. Gallagher exhales slowly. This is what victory sounds like. Nothing but engine noise and radio static. The reason the Japanese never anticipated this moment isn't simple. It's systemic. From the cockpit, a Hellcat in 1944 doesn't look radically different from one in 1943. No dramatic silhouette change, no visible weapon overhaul, nothing that screams new threat from a distance. The danger lives in margins. Structural reinforcement hidden beneath aluminum skin. Subtle aerodynamic refinements that delay control, stiffening at high speed. Armor redistribution that protects without compromising balance. Engine tuning that allows sustained power at altitude without sacrificing reliability. None of this announces itself in combat, until it's too late. Japanese intelligence officers rely heavily on pilot reports. Those reports arrive fragmented, emotional, often contradictory. One pilot swears the American fighter was impossibly fast. Another claims it survived cannon hits. A third insists it climbed like a rocket. There is no single explanation. So there is no response. Gallagher watches a lone Zero try to climb toward him, then break off abruptly, engine straining. The pilot knows now. They all know. But knowledge without options is useless. The Zero is still agile, still deadly in the right hands. But it is fragile, lightly armored, and increasingly outpaced. Its design philosophy, range, maneuverability, pilot skill, belongs to a different phase of the war. The Hellcat belongs to this one. Back in Japan, engineers scramble to respond. New aircraft designs are rushed forward. More powerful engines are proposed. But factories are bombed, resources are scarce, time is gone. Meanwhile, American industry refines what already works. Hellcats roll off production lines with quiet improvements folded in almost monthly. Pilots rotate through training pipelines that emphasize survival over heroics. Doctrine adapts faster than the enemy can observe. The result is asymmetry. Not just in machines, but in learning. Gallagher turns for home as the radio confirms it. Airspace secure. He banks his Hellcat toward the carrier task force, the Pacific stretching endless and calm beneath him. He knows tomorrow will bring another mission, another sweep, another fight. But he also knows something else. The worst is over. For the men flying Hellcats, the war in the air has become predictable, dangerous, but manageable. They understand their aircraft, trust its limits, and exploit its strengths ruthlessly. For the Japanese pilots who remain, every takeoff is a gamble against an enemy they can't catch, can't outturn without dying, and can't outlast. The hidden Hellcat upgrade was never a single breakthrough. It was the realization that winning the air war didn't require elegance, only dominance.